Jason sat back in the comfortable chair, gazing out of the window at the quiet, alien landscape. The world outside looked nothing like Earth. Towering crystalline structures reached into the sky, shimmering in the soft glow of twin suns. It was beautiful, but Jason still found himself adjusting to it all. After marrying Kayla, an alien from the powerful Arvani species, his life had completely changed. It had only been a few weeks since the wedding, and every day seemed to bring something new, something unexpected. At first, the excitement of marrying someone from a different world was thrilling. Kayla was unlike anyone he had ever met. Tall, elegant, with features so striking they almost felt otherworldly. Her intelligence, grace, and strength made her stand out among her people, and Jason couldn't help but admire her every day. But there were challenges, too. The culture, the traditions, and the language were all different. Sometimes it felt as if Jason were a stranger in his own home. It was a quiet evening when Kayla approached him, her voice soft but steady. Jason looked up from his thoughts, seeing her standing in the doorway, a thoughtful expression on her face. She was beautiful. Even without trying, her long silver hair flowing down her back like liquid light. "Jason," she began, her tone almost hesitant, "I need to talk to you about something important." He set his glass down on the table and nodded, sensing the seriousness in her voice. "What's on your mind?" Kayla stepped into the room and sat down beside him, her posture perfect. Yet there was an almost nervous energy about her. Jason could tell something was weighing on her. "My sister Zira is struggling. She's old enough now to understand relationships, but she doesn't know anything about them. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I've decided. You can help her." Jason blinked, taken aback by her words. He wasn't sure what Kayla meant by help, but the look on her face told him it wasn't something trivial. "Wait, help her with what exactly?" he asked, still processing her request. "Zira is curious about human relationships," Kayla said quietly, her eyes avoiding his. "She doesn't understand how men and women interact, how love works between humans. I thought maybe you could teach her." Jason's mind raced. He had only been married to Kayla for a short time, and already she was asking him to help her sister understand something as complex as human relationships. The request seemed unusual, even for someone from another world. He rubbed his temples, unsure of what to say. "You want me to teach her about love?" he asked slowly, trying to grasp the full weight of her words. "Your sister doesn't know anything about it?" Kayla nodded, her expression serious. "In our culture, relationships are very different. We don't form bonds the way humans do. There are no real emotional connections, just companionship. Zira is curious, and I don't know how else to explain things to her. She doesn't have the human experience. I thought, since you're human, you could help her understand." Jason was silent for a moment, his mind working through what Kayla was asking. He had always known that the Arvani were a highly advanced species with their own ways of living, but the idea that they didn't experience love the same way humans did was both fascinating and unsettling. He tried to imagine what it would be like to grow up in a world where emotions like love, affection, and even friendship were foreign concepts. It was hard to comprehend. "I don't know," Jason began, his voice unsure. "I mean, I can try to explain things, but it feels like a lot. Love isn't just something you teach. It's personal, you know? And your sister's, well, she's an alien, right? She's not going to get it the way humans do." Kayla reached out and gently placed her hand on his. Her touch was warm, comforting. "I understand your hesitation. I know this is difficult, but I trust you. Zira looks up to you, and I think she can learn something valuable from your perspective. Maybe it will help her understand herself better and her place in the universe." Jason glanced at her, seeing the earnestness in her eyes. She wasn't asking this lightly. She genuinely believed this was something important. He let out a deep Sci, unsure of how he felt about the situation, but knowing there wasn't much room to say no. He had never imagined himself in a position where he would be teaching an alien about relationships. But here he was. "Okay," he said, finally coming to a decision. "I'll try, but I can't promise that it will be easy for either of us." "Human relationships aren't exactly straightforward." Kayla smiled, her eyes softening. "I know, Jason. But that's why I think you're the right person for the job. You've always been kind, honest, and patient. That's something Zira needs to see." Jason nodded, though a part of him still felt uncertain. Helping Zira wasn't just about explaining human relationships. It was about navigating the complicated terrain of emotional connections, something he didn't fully understand himself. But if Kayla trusted him, maybe he could find a way to make it work. As Kayla stood up to leave, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Jason. This means more to me than you know." Jason watched her leave, his mind still spinning with the weight of what he had agreed to. He had never imagined that his new life with Kayla would involve teaching her sister about the complexities of human love. But as he sat alone in the room, the next morning, as the sun began to rise over the alien landscape, Jason prepared himself for the unusual task ahead. The house he shared with Kayla was quiet, the air cool and crisp, unlike anything he had experienced back on Earth. Jason still found himself amazed by the beauty of it all, by the strange beauty of Kayla's world. But today his mind was focused on the unexpected guest he would soon be meeting. Zira, Kayla's younger sister, had arrived just as the sun was peeking over the horizon. She stood in the doorway, her silver hair glowing faintly in the morning light, much like Kayla's. Zira was beautiful in her own right, but there was a rawness to her that Jason had noticed. She was more reserved than Kayla, her eyes full of curiosity, though she kept her distance. "Good morning, Zira," Jason greeted, his voice calm, even though his nerves were starting to show. Zira gave him a small, almost shy smile. "Good morning, Jason. Kayla told me you would help me learn." Jason nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yes, we'll start with the basics today. Relationships between men and women. It's different for humans than for your people, right?" Zira nodded slowly. She was still processing everything Jason said, her large eyes fixed on him, as if trying to read him, trying to understand him in a way she never had before. "I've never understood why humans form these bonds," Zira admitted quietly. "Why does it matter so much?" Jason thought for a moment, trying to find the right words. "Well, humans feel things deeply. When we form a bond with someone, it's because we care about them. We share a connection that goes beyond just companionship. It's emotional. When we love someone, we want to be close to them, to understand them, to protect them." Zira didn't respond right away, but her eyes remained focused on him, analyzing every word. "But why does it hurt so much when something goes wrong? If it's supposed to be about connection, why is there so much pain when it's lost?" Jason was taken aback by the question. He hadn't expected it to be this difficult to explain, especially to someone who had never felt the intensity of human emotions. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Pain comes from love because love is powerful," Jason said, his voice softening. "When you care about someone that much, losing them feels like losing a part of yourself. Love makes us vulnerable. It makes us open up in ways we never thought we could. And that's why it hurts so much when it's gone." Zira looked down at the floor for a moment, as if the weight of his words had settled into her. She was quiet for a while, processing what Jason had said. Jason noticed how still she was, how much she was trying to understand, even if the words didn't make sense to her just yet. "I don't understand," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. "Why would anyone risk that pain? Why would anyone choose to feel that way?" Jason sighed and leaned back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck. He had expected this to be difficult, But he hadn't realized just how deep the cultural divide was. For Zira, relationships were nothing more than a matter of function. There was no emotion tied to the bond. It was simply a way to ensure survival, to maintain the species. For humans, love was much more than that. It was a force that shaped their entire lives. Because, Zira, Jason said, choosing his words carefully, the pain is part of the beauty. It means that what you've experienced, what you've shared mattered. It's like the memories we carry, the good times, the laughter, the moments of closeness. All of that makes the pain worth it, even when it feels overwhelming. Without it, life would feel empty. Zira seemed to consider his words for a long time. She looked out the window, her eyes distant, as if she were seeing the world for the first time. Jason could tell she was trying to put everything together. What he had said, what she had seen in Kayla and him, and what her own feelings were. You think love is worth the pain? Zira asked, her voice quiet but sincere. Jason nodded slowly. Yes, it's worth it, every part of it, even when it's difficult. Zira's expression softened, though her confusion hadn't completely faded. I will try to understand, she said quietly, standing up. But it is harder than I thought. Jason stood as well, watching her as she turned to leave. It's okay, he said. It takes time. Understanding something as complex as love, it's never easy. As Zira left the room, Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility. This was more than just teaching her about human relationships. It was about showing her a different way of seeing the world, one filled with emotions and connections that went beyond survival and function. But he knew that this was a challenge. He had to face not just for Kayla but for Zira as well, and the light, her posture stiff, but her eyes still full of curiosity. Jason would greet her, and they would sit together in the living room, talking about things most humans learned about when they were young. Simple things like holding hands, talking openly about feelings, and what it meant to truly care for someone. But Zira had no frame of reference. To her, these were just words with no meaning. One day, after a particularly awkward conversation about why humans kissed, Zira seemed quiet. She wasn't looking at Jason the way she usually did, with those large, searching eyes. Instead, she was staring out the window, lost in thought. Jason wasn't sure if she was thinking about the lesson, or if she was simply tired of hearing about it. Jason, she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, unsure. I think I am starting to understand, but not the way you do. Jason raised an eyebrow. This was the first time she had spoken like this, vulnerable, unsure. It caught him off guard. What do you mean? He asked gently, leaning forward a little. Zira looked at him, her gaze steady but filled with confusion. I understand that humans care for each other, that you form bonds. But when you talk about love, I don't feel it. I don't understand why it matters. It's not something I have ever felt before. So when you say it's worth the pain, it's hard for me to understand that. He questioned itself, might be too personal. Jason's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected Zira to bring Kayla into it. It was one thing to explain human relationships in general, but explaining his love for Kayla was something entirely different. He thought about her for a moment. How strong she was, how kind she had been to him since the day they met. There were moments, small but significant, where Jason felt like they truly understood each other. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I do, Jason said, his voice steady. I love Kayla, and it's not always easy, but it's worth it. Every part of it, even when it's difficult. Zira nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. Jason wasn't sure if she was processing his words or if she was simply giving him the answer she thought he wanted. But when she spoke again, her voice was firmer. I want to understand, she said. I want to know what love is. But it's hard for me. I don't know what it feels like. I don't know how to start. Jason could see the frustration in her eyes, and it reminded him of how he felt when he first tried to understand her world. But unlike her, Jason had the advantage of knowing love from his own experiences. He had known what it was to care for someone, to be vulnerable and open. But for Zira, it was all new, and it wasn't something she could learn in a single conversation. "You don't have to understand everything right away," Jason said softly. "It's okay to be confused. It's okay to not have all the answers. Love takes time. It's something you'll feel when the time is right." Zira looked at him, her eyes searching, as if trying to find something in his face that she could hold on to. "But how do I know when the time is right?" she asked. Jason paused. That was a question that didn't have a simple answer. He could try to explain, but the truth was, you didn't know when the time was right for love. It was something that just happened. You could never plan for it. He had learned that the hard way. "You'll know," he said quietly. "When it happens, you'll feel it. And when you do, you'll understand why everything else, the pain, the joy, the vulnerability, it all matters. You'll understand why love is worth the risk." Zira nodded again, but her face was still uncertain. She wasn't ready to accept what he was saying, not yet. Jason knew that. This wasn't something that could be taught in a day or even a week. It would take time, maybe even years. But the most important thing was that she was willing to try. As Zira stood up to leave, she turned to him one last time. "Thank you, Jason," she said, her voice quieter than before. "I will keep trying to understand." Jason watched her walk out, his thoughts still swirling. He wasn't sure how much of it had really sunk in for her, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't give up on helping her. After all, this wasn't just about teaching her what love meant. It was about teaching her that the emotions humans experienced were not weaknesses, but strengths. He glanced at the window, the sky now turning a deeper shade of blue. Teaching Zira was going to take time, but he was ready for it. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time since Kayla's request, Jason felt a glimmer of hope. The following days brought small steps forward, though Jason still felt uncertain about how much progress was being made. Zira had been showing up for their lessons, asking questions, sometimes staying silent for long stretches, as if trying to absorb what he was saying. But Jason couldn't shake the feeling that she was still struggling to understand, and there were times when he wondered if she would ever truly grasp the complexity of human relationships. One afternoon, as they sat in the living room, the silence between them seemed heavier than usual. Zira sat across from him, her posture as stiff as always, her eyes thoughtful. Jason watched her, trying to gauge whether she was truly paying attention or if her mind had wandered again. It was clear she was trying, but her efforts often felt disconnected from the human emotions he was trying to explain. Zira broke the silence first. "Jason," she said quietly, her voice softer than it had been before, "I've been thinking." Jason looked up, intrigued. This was the first time she had spoken in such a calm and measured tone. "What have you been thinking?" "About?" "I've been thinking about how you said love makes people vulnerable," she replied, her eyes meeting his for the first time in a while. "I've been trying to understand it, but it's not like anything I've felt before." Jason nodded, trying to keep his response simple. "It's not something you can force yourself to feel. It's something that happens when the time is right, like I told you before. You don't have to rush it. It's okay if you don't fully understand it yet." Zira shifted in her seat, her gaze drifting back to the window. "But what if I never feel it? What if I can't understand it the way you do?" Jason's heart sank a little at the question. He could hear the doubt in her voice, the fear that she would never truly experience the thing that made humans human, love. The thought of her never knowing what it was like to feel that connection with someone was troubling. He had to think carefully about how to respond. "You're not alone in this," Jason said gently. "It's not a race to figure everything out. Everyone feels love in different ways. Some people feel it quickly, others take longer. There's no wrong way to experience it. You just have to be open to it when it happens." Zira was quiet for a long time, as if considering his words. Jason could see the wheels turning in her mind, trying to make sense of it all. She had always been so composed, so confident in her actions. But when it came to understanding human emotions, she was just as uncertain as anyone else who was learning something new. It was clear that Kayla's sister was starting to face a challenge that she couldn't simply solve with logic. "I still don't understand the pain," Zira said, her voice distant. "You say love can hurt, but why? Why would anyone want to feel that? If it's so painful, why not avoid it?" Jason thought for a moment. He had always known that love could bring pain, but it was hard to explain that feeling to someone who had never experienced it. He had to find a way to make it clear without making it sound like it was all about suffering. "Pain is part of love," he explained slowly. "When you love someone, you open yourself up to the possibility of losing them. And when that happens, it hurts. But the pain comes from caring so deeply about someone. It's a reminder of how much you've shared with them, how much they've meant to you. It's not just about the hurt. It's about the love that came before it." Zira's eyes were fixed on him, her expression unreadable. Jason wasn't sure if she fully understood, but he could see she was listening. The way she was looking at him made him think that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to get it. It wasn't a quick process. Understanding love was something that took time, and maybe that's what Zira needed to realize. It wasn't something that could be rushed. "What about you and Kayla?" Zira asked after a long pause. "You said love is worth the pain. But what if you lost her? Would it still be worth it?" Jason's heart ached at the thought of losing Kayla. She had become such a big part of his life in such a short time. The idea of losing her was something he tried not to think about, but Zira's question made it impossible to ignore. "Yes," Jason said firmly, though his voice was quieter than usual. "It would still be worth it. Love isn't just about the good times. It's about being there for each other through everything. The hard times, the struggles, the moments of joy. Losing someone you love is painful, but the love you've shared with them is something that lasts. It's something that changes you, makes you better." Zira didn't speak for a while, and Jason didn't push her to respond. He could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to understand, but it was clear she wasn't there yet, and that was okay. Understanding love wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a journey, one that took patience and time. But Jason had faith that Zira would get there eventually. As the afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows, Jason looked at Zira one last time before she stood up to leave. "Thank you for trying," he said, his voice softer now. "It's okay. If you don't understand everything right away, we'll take it one step at a time." Zira smiled faintly, though it was a smile full of uncertainty. "I'll keep trying," she said quietly before walking out of the room. Jason watched her go, his thoughts still lingering on the conversation. He knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but as he sat back in his chair, he felt a sense of quiet hope. Zira was making progress, even if it was slow, and maybe, just maybe, she would one day understand why love was worth all the pain. A few days passed, and the lessons continued. Jason noticed that Zira had become more comfortable with the idea of learning about love and human relationships. She asked fewer questions about the pain that love could cause and more questions about the connection that people shared. Still, there were moments of doubt in her eyes, moments when Jason wondered if she was truly beginning to understand or if she was simply pretending to. One afternoon, Zira came to Jason with a question that caught him off guard. It was a quiet day, and the sun had started to set, casting long shadows across the room. Zira was sitting across from him, looking more thoughtful than usual. "Jason," she said softly, "I've been thinking about something." Jason looked up from the book he was reading, sensing that this was going to be one of their deeper conversations. He put the book down and turned his full attention to her. "What's on your mind?" he asked, his voice calm. Zira hesitated, for a moment her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. "It's about love," she began, her voice quieter than usual. "You've explained that it's something powerful, something that can change people. But what if someone is afraid of it? What if they don't want to feel it because they're scared?" Jason felt a pang in his chest. He had never really thought about it that way before. What if love was something someone didn't want to experience? What if the fear of the pain was enough to make someone avoid it altogether? He could understand that fear, but he also knew how hard it was to live without love. "It's natural to be afraid," Jason said after a pause, his voice thoughtful. "Love makes you vulnerable, and being vulnerable means you're open to being hurt. But that doesn't mean you should avoid it. Fear can hold you back from some of the best things in life. If you don't take the risk, you'll never know what you might have." Zira looked down at her hands, as if considering his words. "But what if the risk is too much?" she asked quietly. "What if the pain is too great to bear?" Jason sighed. He knew how real that fear could be. He had felt it in his own life. He had known heartbreak, the kind that seemed impossible to get over. But he also knew that love was worth the risk. It was worth the chance to feel something real, to connect with someone in a way that made life feel fuller. "Zira, love isn't about avoiding pain," Jason explained softly. "It's about choosing to experience something that can make you a better person, even if it's hard. The pain isn't the end of the story, it's just part of it. When you love someone, you share a part of yourself with them. And even if it doesn't last forever, that connection shapes you in a way nothing else can." Zira seemed lost in thought, her eyes distant. Jason wasn't sure if she understood everything he was saying, but he could see that she was trying to see love not as something to fear, but as something that could make her stronger, that could make her grow. "I don't know if I can do that," Zira said finally, her voice almost a whisper. "I don't know if I can love the way you do, the way humans do. It's also messy." Jason chuckled lightly, the sound soft and reassuring. "Yeah, love is messy. It doesn't always make sense, and it's not always easy. But that's part of what makes it real. If it were easy, it wouldn't mean as much. It's the messy parts, the imperfect moments, that make the good times even better." Zira gave him a small smile, though it was still tinged with uncertainty. Maybe one day I'll understand." Jason nodded, understanding her hesitation. "You will, in your own time, when you're ready. And you don't have to have all the answers now. It's okay to take your time with it." Zira stood up, looking more at peace than she had in days. "Thank you, Jason," she said, her voice softer than before. "I think I'm starting to get it." Slowly, Jason smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. Just remember, love isn't something you can force. It happens when it happens, and when it does, you'll know." Zira nodded, then turned to leave the room. Jason watched her go, feeling a sense of quiet pride. It had taken a while, but he could see that Zira was beginning to understand what he had been trying to teach her. She was still uncertain, but she was moving closer to the truth. She was willing to take the steps, even if they were small ones. As he sat back in his chair, Jason thought about how much he had learned from Zira as well. She had taught him patience, the importance of taking things one step at a time. He had always believed that love was something you either felt or you didn't, But Zira's willingness to learn had shown him that understanding love could be just as important as feeling it. That evening, as the stars began to fill the sky, outside, Jason thought about Kayla, his wife. He thought about the love they shared, the bond that had brought them together. It wasn't always perfect, but it was real. And that was all that mattered. Maybe one day, Zira would find the same thing, a love that was messy, complicated, and worth every moment. For now, though, Jason was content. Zira was on her way to understanding, and that was all he could ask for. In time, he knew she would learn the most important lesson of all, that love wasn't just something to fear, it was something to embrace. Weeks passed, and Jason continued to work with Zira on understanding human relationships. She had come a long way since that first awkward conversation. There were still moments when she seemed confused or distant, but Jason could see the small changes in her. Her questions had become more thoughtful, and there was a deeper curiosity in her eyes now. She wasn't just asking to understand for the sake of learning anymore. She was asking because she wanted to know, because she was beginning to feel something shift inside her. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. Zira still struggled with certain aspects of human relationships. She found the idea of emotional vulnerability uncomfortable, something she couldn't quite understand. But Jason never gave up. He knew that understanding love wasn't something that happened overnight, especially for someone from a culture that saw things so differently. One day, as Jason sat at the kitchen table, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of Kayla, Zira walked in. She had been quieter than usual for the past few days, and Jason noticed she had been spending a lot of time alone, thinking. There was a seriousness about her now, a certain weight in her presence that hadn't been there before. "Jason," she said, her voice steady, "I need to talk to you." Jason looked up from his cup of coffee, surprised by the change in her tone. It was the first time she had sounded so certain. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Zira sat down across from him, her posture straighter than ever, her eyes focused. "I've been thinking about what you said, the part about love being something you choose, something you let yourself feel, even when it's hard. I think I understand it now." Jason's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this. He had expected another question, maybe another moment of doubt. But what Zira said next was different. It felt like a breakthrough. "I've been thinking about how you said love makes you better, that it changes you. And I think I'm starting to see it. I've watched Kayla and you, and I see how you two are, how you share things, how you support each other. I've been watching you both, and I think I finally get it." Jason felt a lump form in his throat. He hadn't realized how much he had been waiting for this moment, for Zira to see it for herself. He had always believed in love, in how it could change people, make them grow, even when it wasn't easy. But to hear Zira say that she was starting to understand, it was more than he had hoped for. "That's great, Zira," Jason said, his voice a little shaky with emotion. "It's not always easy, but it's worth it. Love is about opening yourself up, trusting someone enough to let them in, even when it scares you." Zira nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "I never understood that. I thought love was just a way to keep people together, a way to survive. But now I see it's more than that. It's about connection, about sharing a part of yourself with someone else without fear. And that is a kind of strength." Jason smiled at her, feeling a deep sense of pride. Zira had come so far. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been quick. But she was finally understanding something that so many people struggled with for years, the true meaning of love. "I'm glad you see it, Zira," Jason said, his voice warm with pride. Love makes us stronger, not because it's easy, but because it's real. It's messy, it's complicated, but it's worth every moment." Zira smiled back at him. the smile softer than it had been before. There was still some uncertainty in her eyes, but it wasn't the same kind of doubt that had been there before. It was a quiet understanding, as if she had finally allowed herself to accept that love didn't need to be perfect to be meaningful. "I think I understand now," Zira said quietly. "Love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. A choice to be vulnerable, to care for someone, and to let them care for you. It's not about avoiding pain. It's about living fully, no matter what happens." Jason nodded, his heart swelling with emotion. "Exactly. It's about living fully, and knowing that the good and the bad, the joy and the pain, are all part of what makes love real." There was a pause, and then Zira stood up. She looked at Jason with a new sense of determination in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for helping me understand. I may not know everything, but I think I'm ready to start experiencing it." Jason watched her walk out of the room, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. He hadn't just helped Zira understand love, he had helped her see something deeper about herself. It was a feeling he couldn't quite explain, but it was there. A deep satisfaction that he had made a difference, even if it was just in one person's life. Later that evening, Kayla came home, and Jason couldn't help but tell her about the conversation he had with Zira. Kayla listened, a soft smile on her face as she leaned against the doorframe. "I'm proud of you, Jason," she said. "You've done more for Zira than you know. She's learning, and that's all that matters. It's not about the destination, but the journey." Jason smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He had been worried about whether Zira would ever truly understand, but now he saw that it wasn't about rushing to the finish line. It was about being patient, about taking it one step at a time. As the night wore on, Jason sat back, his thoughts turning to Kayla, to Zira, and to the strange, beautiful journey of love they were all on together. There was still so much to learn, but for the first time in a long while, Jason felt sure that everything would be okay. Zira was ready to experience love in her own way, and he was ready to be there for her, every step of the way. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet progress Zira had made in understanding human relationships became more evident. Jason noticed a subtle shift in her. She was no longer the distant, unsure figure she had been when they first started their lessons. She seemed more open, more curious, and even more expressive. It wasn't that she had all the answers, far from it. But she was no longer afraid to feel, to ask the questions that had once seemed too difficult. One afternoon, after another of their usual sessions, Zira caught Jason off guard once again. She had been unusually quiet, sitting by the window, her gaze far off, as if lost in thought. Jason had almost forgotten that she was there when she finally spoke. "Jason," she said, her voice almost hesitant, "I've been thinking about what you said, the part about love not always being easy, but still being worth it. And I think I'm starting to understand why people choose to love, even when it's hard." Jason turned toward her, a soft smile playing on his lips. He was proud of the progress Zira had made, but he hadn't expected this moment to come so soon. "What brought that on?" he asked gently, giving her the space to explain. Zira turned to him, her eyes thoughtful. "I watched you and Kayla," she said, her voice steady but tinged with a kind of awe. "I see how you two are, how you've been together. I see the way you support each other, even when things aren't perfect. I see the way Kayla looks at you, and I can tell that love isn't just about the good things. It's about the way you share your life with someone, the moments when you're vulnerable, when you trust each other completely." Jason was silent for a moment, touched by her words. He hadn't realized how closely Zira had been observing them, how much she had been learning simply by watching him and Kayla. He realized now that love wasn't just something he was teaching. her through words. It was something she was seeing in action, in the way Kayla and he interacted every day. Zira continued, her voice softer now. I still don't know if I feel it yet, but I think I'm starting to understand why it's worth trying. The idea of letting someone in, of sharing everything with them, it's not something I ever thought I would want. But now, I see how it can make life feel fuller, somehow. Jason felt a swell of pride and relief. Zira had come so far. The road hadn't been easy for her, and it hadn't been quick, but she had made it. She had opened her heart, and though she hadn't experienced love yet the way humans did, she had begun to see its value. That, Jason realized, was what mattered most. You're getting it, Zira, Jason said, his voice filled with warmth. Love is about connection. It's about opening up to someone even when it's scary, because you trust them enough to let them see the real you. It's messy and imperfect, but that's what makes it real. Zira smiled at him, her expression a mixture of relief and understanding. I think I want to try, she said, her voice firm now. Not just with someone else, but with myself, too. I want to understand what it feels like to care for someone deeply. I want to know what it's like to love and be loved. Jason nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. You'll get there, Zira. You're already on the right path. Just remember, love isn't something you have to rush. It happens when it happens, and when it does, you'll know. Zira stood up, her expression resolute. I think I'm ready to start looking at love differently. Not as something to fear, but as something to embrace, in my own way. Jason watched her leave, feeling a quiet sense of hope fill him. He had done what he had set out to do. He had helped Zira see that love wasn't just a concept. It was something that could shape her life, even if she didn't completely understand it yet. That evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Jason sat with Kayla. The house felt different. Now more alive, more full of possibility. Kayla had noticed the change in her sister, too, the subtle shift in her demeanor, and she was proud of what Jason had done. You've helped her more than you know, Kayla said, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. Zira will never be the same. You've opened a door for her, and she's walking through it. Jason smiled, reaching for Kayla's hand. I only showed her the way. She did the hard work. But it feels good, knowing that she's starting to see things differently. Kayla leaned her head against his shoulder, her touch warm and comforting. You've done something incredible. You've given her the gift of understanding, and that's something she'll carry with her forever. Jason nodded, feeling content. He had come to this strange new world with doubts, with fears of not being able to handle the challenges that lay ahead. But as he sat there, watching Kayla beside him, he realized something important. Love wasn't just about the lessons he had taught Zira. It was about the lessons they had all learned together. The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more lessons to learn. But Jason felt ready for whatever came next. He had Kayla by his side, and now he could see that Zira would also find her way. Love was something they would all experience in their own time, in their own way, and that was enough. As the night settled around them, Jason couldn't help but feel grateful. Grateful for Kayla, for Zira, and for the unexpected lessons that love had taught him. He wasn't just teaching Zira anymore. He was living the lesson himself. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for.